Welcome to Chasing the Sparkle, celebrating the things that make your heart shine. I'm Lunati, your cozy rabbit VTuber, and today we're discussing history with the dragon kitsune crossbreed, StaryaBit. We'll discuss everything there is to know about history and see how it makes Starya's heart shine. Thank you for joining us, Starya. Nope, no, welcome was perfect. That was fantastic. No, I love that. I love that. Thank you for welcoming me to my own stream. Chat says you're gorgeous, and I agree. No, no. If you're gonna go for a bit, you have to stick to it now. This is your life now. We can't hear Star. Oh no, let me fix. Why can't you hear Star? You should be able to hear Star. You should very much be able to hear Star. Someone said they could. No audio. Let me fix. Very. Give me a minute. Okay, and fixing. There we go.
All right. Can they hear me now? Can you guys hear? Yes, they can hear me.
I'm a professional streamer, child.
Got the Canadian.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Oh no, now you have to do it again.
Welcome, Santa. Or Luna. Fuck! God damn it.
I gave my name in the intro, Star.
My mind has been so fucked. Okay, you want to try the intro again? Let's try the intro again.
Fuck it, we ball. Let's do it. Welcome to Chasing the Sparkle, celebrating the things that make your heart shine. I'm Lunati, your cozy rabbit VTuber, and today we're discussing history with the dragon kitsune crossbreed, StaryaBit. We'll discuss everything there is to know about history and alternative history, and see how it makes Starya's heart shine. Thank you for joining us, Starya.
Hi, welcome.
Solid. I love we doubled back and we ended up with the same shit.
Hi. Hi, chat. Hi, everyone. Oh my God. Welcome in. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about history and alternate history.
So, Starya.
Yeah. Hi.
And introduce yourself, you strange Canadian woman.
Hi, I'm a strange Canadian woman. I stream sometimes. You should probably check me out. StaryaBit VT. You can check me out. I'm pretty cool, I guess. I'm also awkward as fuck. Shout out to my boyfriend who's in the chat. I love you. You're amazing. Thank you for coming on out today.
You have a boyfriend? You're a VTuber. You have a boyfriend out there. That's illegal.
Fucking
They do this podcast. That's a crime.
Okay.
Can I have a boyfriend in public? What do you think this is? Think you're a person? You think you have rights?
Oh my God. Okay. Yes, I love history. I love alternate history. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be discussing history and alternate history. So make sure you guys get some food, get something to drink, and come relax with us.
Yeah. Can you explain to me what alternative history is? I know what history is. I don't know what alternate history is. Can you explain?
Right. So alternative history, right? That's taking a concept, say, let's talk about World War I, for example, right? With World War I, you had the Entente and the Central Powers. The Entente being France, Russia, UK, Canada, the United States, all of the quote unquote allied countries, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you had the Central Powers, which was the Ottoman Empire, Bulgaria, Germany, Austria Hungary. In our own timeline, the Entente won.
Yes.
The Entente won. Russia went through a civil war and became the Soviet Union, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was the interwar period leading up to World War II.
Yeah.
Now, if we're talking alternate history, right, we basically, instead of saying the Entente won, right, we sort of ask ourselves, what if the Central Powers won, right?
Gotcha.
How would global politics and different nations be different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one idea, right, is if the Central Powers won, that the UK and France have their own communist revolutions instead of Russia.
I wonder what it would be like if the UK had a communist revolution. Would that, by extension, have made the entirety of like? I wonder how that would like impact like the empire they have going on.
Um, basically the consensus is that the royal family would flee. They would flee from the UK and they would flee to Canada,
Mm.
where they would still sort of try to operate their empire from Canada instead of the UK.
Oh,
That is a general consensus of what that would mean, of what that would mean in that sort of alternate history, right?
cowards!
Oh my god.
Imagine running. Could it be me?
Lanai!
Right. So how long have you been interested in like history and alternative history? What got you into that?
So I first started learning it throughout high school, which, obviously high school, nah, right? Learning it throughout school. The unfortunate part, right, is when you learn it in school, you always learn it from the perspective of the country that you reside in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's only certain things that you learn about. So for us in the Canadian curriculum, the only things that you really will touch on are the World Wars. You'll talk about the settlement of Canada, basically Upper and Lower Canada. You'll learn about the War of 1812. You'll briefly skim over the Cold War, and that's pretty much it.
Gotcha.
Right? Whereas if you wanted to learn on your own, you can delve into any subject. You can delve into the Napoleonic Wars. You can delve into the Victorian era, Renaissance, uh, Age of Industrialization. You can go back to medieval times. You can go back to the Romans, Egyptians,
Wait,
Aztecs, Mayans.
wait, did they not teach you about like the Egyptians in school?
No, nope,
Really?
that's not part of the curriculum.
That's crazy. Cause okay, so just to compare my education a little bit, I grew up in America, but I grew up in New York, so like we have a relatively different education, I think, than even the rest of the country. So we did learn about stuff like Egypt and like the entirety of world history one and two was just ancient civilizations. So the concept of not learning that in history does boggle the mind a little bit because without knowing that, how do you know what we're going through now?
Exactly. And that's sort of the thing, right? That's why I started sort of learning it on my own, is because when I was learning in school, right, I started to sort of enjoy learning about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, maybe I should learn more, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different ways that you can learn about history, whether that be through textbooks, through online articles, through YouTube videos, because yes, history YouTube is a thing. You can learn it through tons of various different means, documentaries, TV. There's so many different places that you can learn about history, right? So I started to consume the media, and sort of as I was starting to consume the media within high school, I was like, this is something I really like. This is something I really enjoy. So, I'm gonna learn more about this. I like watching channels like Smithsonian.
Mm-hmm.
Smithsonian does some really good stuff. National Geographic brushes on some stuff. The History Channel. There's also a whole bunch of different YouTubers and stuff who make history teaching videos. There's Oversimplified, which, you know, many people have heard of, whilst very basic and very general in terms of teaching. Yes, you can learn history from it. There's obviously a lot deeper understanding and deeper learning that goes into learning what Oversimplified's teaching about, but it's a pretty decent channel for someone who is sort of beginning to get into a topic in history.
So now that we're on the subject of history YouTube, how do you feel about history talk? History TikTok?
History TikTok? See, that I wouldn't know how to address because I don't really look at TikTok. I don't really watch TikTok.
No, that's valid.
I watch YouTube Shorts. A lot of the YouTube Shorts that I watch, though, in terms of like history, it's more alternate history than anything.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I've watched some history talk, particularly about, and this is less about world history as a whole, but about colonialism. And that's how I found out about the museums, and I can never look at a museum the same way.
Museums are a very, not many people know about it, but it is a very controversial battleground in terms of where you can draw the fine line between right and wrong in terms of thievery and stealing. A lot of countries have stolen a lot in terms of creating their own history or showing their own history.
Which, thanks history talk, I can never go to a museum again because I can't look at it the same way anymore. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
You were mentioning about starting with likes or in YouTube videos. If there was a top 5 YouTube channels or top 5 sources that you could recommend to anyone who was looking into researching history and alternative history, where would you recommend they begin?
See, the history scene on YouTube is kind of iffy, right? The best way, in my opinion, to research history or to look into history is to look at various different sources. Because unfortunately, like politics, there does tend to be a lot of bias in terms of, oh, I lean more to the left or oh, I lean more to the right. So it's better to get like a general and broad topic range and channel range in terms of what you are looking at.
True.
Especially when it comes to alternate history, because oh my god, there is so many red flags within alternate history and different topics. Oh my god.
Valid. What's been like the worst red flag that you've seen in alternate history discussions?
There tends to be a lot of iffy talks when it comes to the Middle East, I found. You've got to be very careful when researching that region. Very careful.
I mean, you should be careful when researching anything having to do with history, but especially the Middle East. Let's just make that a general agreement.
Kai, to address what you're stating there are sometimes communities within alternate history that look into alternative future, right? They also delve into that. There's one channel specifically that really, really, really offended me personally.
Oh no, what is that?
Because they were on the side of, oh, Canada should not exist. It should be American.
Shut up.
Very offensive.
Shut the fuck up.
Very offensive.
Has to read the comment. Learning about history from content creators is risky because views and opinions are heavily skewed by current politics, which is very true. Granted,
Yes,
that's the case for everyone, but people making content have more of a reason to misrepresent and sensationalize history,
Yeah.
especially with alternative history, because it can just be fan fiction. How do you
At
feel
the end of
about
the
that?
day, um, in terms of alternative history, right? At the end of the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're an expert or not, everyone will have their different beliefs on how things could possibly go. With alternate history, there's no right or wrong answer. There is alternative history that is more realistic, and there's alternative history that's less realistic,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you sort of have to find that line of like, what makes the most sense to me? What do I believe that could very easily happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are some people within the alternative history scene that think Germany could have won World War One, and then there's other people who think Germany absolutely could not have won World War One no matter what they did,
Mm-hmm.
right? So at the end of the day, when it comes to alternate history, it's all opinion based, and it's all on what you believe could possibly or could not possibly happen.
Mm. I think that's fair. I think
So
that,
there's a lot of gray area.
yeah, I mean, I've seen some, not alternative history, but just like regular history that has been covered pretty questionably because
Absolutely.
as one of my one of my favorite quotes is that history will always be written by the winners, and
Exactly.
that can definitely start to show out when it comes to this like alternative history and in history in general.
Hmm. The unfortunate part, right, is the fact that, like, despite the fact that we live in the world we live in, there has been a lot of atrocities that the quote unquote winner nations, right, throughout history have done. Canada is included in that. We've done some terrible things, right?
But
We have done some terrible things. And, you know, unfortunately, unless you go out of your way to look for it, you're not going to find it and you're not going to learn about it,
mm-hmm.
right? Yes, Canada has helped to stop Germany in both world wars, as well as any other players within the world wars. That doesn't excuse Canada for the things that they have done to other people as well. Because, yes, Canada has committed war crimes, they have committed war atrocities. I will not shy away from that.
I mean, I think
But unless you go out of your way to look for that thing or to find out the truth behind it, right?
mm,
Then you won't find it.
right, and I think that's one of the biggest things about researching history. It is the fact that you do have to actually put in the work to look for the truth, or at least the
Of
closest to
course.
the truth that you can find with your resources.
Mm.
So,
To sort of go on what you're saying there, Kai, it's not only Canada. There have been multiple countries across the world that have done a lot of war crimes and a lot of terrorism towards populations. It's not just limited to Canada.
no, I do find it hilarious though. I watched this one video that was saying that Canada's way of going around things is that it's not a war crime the first time. And
Very dangerous words.
I'm just like, those are words.
Very dangerous words.
uh, don't commit war crimes, kids. That's still they're still crimes, and you will go to prison. You are not a country. Please don't commit war crimes.
Just don't commit crimes in general.
You know, it's details, details. Don't commit war crimes. We'll talk about other crimes another day, but don't commit war crimes. Cool.
Cool.
So, if you had to write a book about history tomorrow, whether it be actual, standard history or alternative history, what would you want to write about?
See, that one's an interesting question, and I'm glad that you brought that up. It For me, I think a lot of it would depend on where I'm sort of looking for, right?
Mhm.
Because, like, if I wanted to write about history, right? Unless I wanted to do very, very general history and just like not really get into the nitty gritty, right? I would have to do something more region specific, whether that be North America, South America, Africa, Europe, Asia, Oceania. I'd have to do something more region specific.
Mm-hmm.
So really, like, it depends. And you're also looking at time frame as well. Are we looking at millions of years in the past? Are we looking at 1900s? Are we looking at 1700s? Are we looking at 400s? Like,
That's
it's very subjective, right? There's a whole bunch of different time periods. It would depend on where we're looking.
I guess what I'm wondering is, let's say you got to choose the topic for this book. What topic would you select?
I would probably I would probably select a topic around the sort of theme of dark countries that you don't realize the past of.
Elaborate. What do you mean by that?
So, like, I'll give you an example, right?
Yeah.
This is something not known about a lot of people. And again, this is something that you only learn about if you dig far enough, right? This is something that they do teach in schools, but only they only cover it. They don't really get into too much detail about it. Residential schools in Canada. Basically, the whole premise behind residential schools, and by the way, I'm just going to forewarn this is a dark topic, all right? So if you are not okay with dark topics, viewer and listener discretion advised. Residential schools were a thing that were created in Canada, basically when Canada was first settled by the Brits, right?
Mm-hmm.
That carried up all the way until about the 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
They basically abducted and forcefully took away Indigenous children from Indigenous communities and quote unquote force the Indigenous out of them. They tried to force them to become more European.
Yeah.
This would include things like if they were to speak their native language, they would get assaulted. They would get beaten.
Yeah.
There was a lot of sexual assault. There was a lot of starvation. There was a lot of cruelty and punishment throughout the whole system. And there are multiple occasions of Indigenous children trying to run away and getting killed off in the wilderness because they were trying to escape the cruelty that they were being put through.
Just
a very dark thing in Canadian past, but it is something that has happened.
Yeah. Just as like a general word of warning, if you ever are looking at yourself and you're wondering, are you the bad guy? And children are involved. The answer is probably yes. The answer is probably yes.
You know what? Fair enough, Kai. That's fair enough.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's exactly it, Kai. That is exactly it. You have it on the dot.
Everyone has their own definition of the good guys in every historical event ever. So the US and the Western world are largely seen as good because they won both world wars. Good point. That's fair.
Yep. I can give you another example if you want as well. It is up to you.
I think we're good this time. That's so much atrocity.
Yeah.
We agreed to wait till episode 5 for atrocities.
Well, you asked.
We agreed. Why does history have so many atrocities?
Unfortunately, that's just the way that history on our planet as a whole has had.
Valid. Why so many atrocities? We could have like 75% less atrocity and we'd be okay. What keeps your interest and your love for history ablaze?
Learning new things.
Mm,
Every single new thing that I have learned, right? Every single new thing that I learn or have learned is always intriguing to me.
mm. So
Like, I can give you another example. And this is not a war crime or an atrocity. So we're steering clear of that now.
lovely.
All good. Um, the Second Carthaginian War.
Mm,
So this is Carthage against Rome. We're talking what, like, I can't even remember what year this would have taken place. In any case, Carthage versus Rome, right?
mm,
Hannibal, right? Who at the time was super popular for helping the Carthaginians basically hold out against the Romans because the Romans were trying to take over them. There was disagreements and it escalated, and there was a whole war and a second war about it. Hannibal basically went and conquered Iberia.
mm.
Then from Iberia, crossed the Andes Mountains with his army on elephants, right? And
Traditionally a
then
very good thing to ride, yes?
and then crossed the Alps on elephants to invade the Romans from the north, right? Because they fully expected them, being across the Mediterranean, to invade from the south. The Romans were fully prepared with their navy and with their coastal defenses for the Carthaginians to invade them from the south. But Hannibal invaded them from the north. They did not expect that whatsoever.
I could just see the Romans are like prepared at the southern border, and then Hannibal just shows up like, surprise, bitch.
That's basically what happened. And the consulate inside of the Roman Republic, because it would have been the Roman Republic at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were freaking out, right? Because they didn't expect this to happen. They didn't expect him to be ballsy enough to cross the Alps with fucking elephants.
No one does.
And
No one ever does ever expect the elephants. Now that I think about it, like think about it, right? If you were to ever plan an invasion, an attack, would you plan to do it on elephants?
well, see, it's not just that, right? But also the fact, right, that when he invaded from the north, the way he resupplied is he lived off of the land. He lived off of the land and he recruited the barbarians and different peoples within the north of Italy, right, to
Mm-hmm.
fight for him.
Yes.
Like, you look at modern day, right? Modern war, it's fine, right? There's innovations, but in terms of creativity within warfare, nothing will ever compare until pre-industrial age warfare. Ever.
I mean, I guess that makes sense because now, like Kyriel said, if an invading army rode elephants through mountains for months, we'd hear about it by now. back
Oh, you'd
then,
hear about it in the news the next day. Yeah.
back then there was no way to like be like, oh, by the way, they're riding on elephants through the Alps, and so it's
Well,
just
and
like surprise.
even then with warfare now, you have guns, you have explosives, you
True.
have helicopters, planes, drones. Like, you'd never have that now. Ever.
True.
You couldn't.
It's a shame.
It is really, but that's just how we've evolved over time.
Something progress, something me making the world a better place for our descendants, something. It's boring.
Well,
It's boring.
and
But
who's to say we'll know what happens come 50 years time with warfare?
that's a good point. I want panache in my warfare. I want to see I want to see some exciting shit. I'm tired of everything showing up on Twitter.
Yeah, that's fair.
I I want to see a surprise. I want elephants again. Bring back the elephants. I'm just gonna say this. If you brought back elephants into warfare today, the army with them may not win, but we'd all be entertained.
Oh, 100%.
Like, someone would win. It may not be the army, but someone.
Yep.
So, how do you think natural history, like the formation of land, seas, etc., has impacted what we consider history? So, countries, wars, and the like.
Yes. So this one I can use a very, very old historical example.
Mm-hmm.
The Mongolians trying to invade Japan.
Mm.
This is notoriously known to be one of the biggest disasters throughout military history.
It's one of my
The Mongol
favorites.
Empire had tried to invade pre-united Japan, because back then Japan wasn't a unified country. There were a whole bunch of warlording states, city-states basically.
Mm-hmm.
They were not unified, right?
Mm-hmm.
They tried to invade the Japanese islands, and the weather in the Sea of Japan was so notoriously bad. They tried twice and failed both times to invade Japan because of how nasty the weather was and how bad the waves were.
Mm-hmm.
The way geography works and impacts history is a lot bigger than a lot of people think, right?
Right.
We're talking changing the course of evolution, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about changing natural disasters and land formations.
Mm.
We're talking about potentially the changing of religions and how they operate, because a lot of religions can be based off of land and also celestial objects,
This is true.
especially pre-modern, quote unquote, religions,
Yeah.
right? So we're thinking back to like the Aztecs, we're thinking back to the ancient Egyptians, right? A lot of their gods and a lot of older philosophy is built upon the solar system and how the solar system works, right? So we're talking about moon gods, sun gods, we're talking about gods of the earth, gods of the oceans, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those would be changed, right?
Mm. Yes.
We're talking, I can even just give you an interesting example, right?
Please do.
The United Kingdom and the British Isles as a whole didn't used to be islands. There
Mm-hmm.
used to be land there. It was called Doggerland.
It's called what?
Doggerland. That's what it
Ah.
was called, Doggerland. That is originally where the Celts inhabited. They
Mm-hmm.
inhabited Doggerland, right? And throughout plate tectonics and millions of years of sort of the ocean replacing that land, right,
Mm-hmm.
had forced them into the British Isles as well as France, and they used to really inhabit a lot of land before they were driven out by different peoples.
Mm.
But the point stands, right? The UK would not be an island, right, if it wasn't for the fact that that Doggerland disappeared.
Right.
In which case, who's to say there would even be a British state? It could all be France.
I mean, it was France for a little bit there, wasn't it?
They've tried multiple times to take the UK. They've never been successful. Same with the UK against France. Yeah, it shapes peoples, it shapes cultures,
Mm-hmm.
it shapes even evolution.
True. This is very true.
hell, the way that we found out the fact that continental drift is a thing, right, is because we took a look at the fossils basically on the end of South America and the adjacent end of Africa, and we're like, hey, these fossils match, right? So that must have meant that these continents used to be the same because they're the exact same fossils, right?
Hmm. There's a Bo
Now,
Burnham
obviously,
song in which he uses a sock puppet to explain history, and he's joyously singing, "Don't you know the world was built with blood and genocide and exploitation?" I, I have
I'm going to
no
be honest,
words.
he's kind of got a point, unfortunately.
He has a point, but like, why with a sock puppet?
Who knows?
I'm I'm less upset about the words and more upset about the puppet. I'm gonna be so honest with you.
We can even look at like relatively close history, right?
Hmm.
So, let's see here. I could actually look this up because I am not. Uh, wow. Okay. Uh, there was an ice storm in 1998
Hmm.
in Quebec. It was
Mm.
mostly Quebec that it affected, right? Which Quebec, compared to the rest of Canada, is the French part of Canada, and for the longest time, they've always had their own identity, and they've always identified with being Quebec than being Canadian, right?
Yes.
There have been multiple secession movements to break away from Canada, right?
Hmm.
But even just something as simple as an ice storm can change that, right?
Right.
The rest of the country, okay, no problem. Have a good one. Thank you for joining us. The rest of the country tried our absolute best to help Quebec out as best as we could with it.
Hmm.
And they were grateful for that. So a lot of the opinions based on being an independent Quebec have subsided because of that,
Right.
right? Had that not happened, right, who's to say that that sentiment would have died down?
That is very true. Are you meaning to tell me that Quebec is the Texas of Canada?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Except that they don't fucking learn.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that is true. That is true, Kai.
think, speaking of ice and snow ruining the day of so many empires, it reminds me of, I believe it was Napoleon.
Napoleon. Yep. French army froze to death.
And it's just like,
It's not only Napoleon, there's another certain dictator that came after him that because of the Russian winter.
and that's what
I,
kills me. Is that it
I
happened
won't say his
twice.
name because I'm going to get banned if I say his name,
Yeah, I don't want
but
to
we
say the
all
other
know
guy's
who I'm
name.
talking about.
I don't want to say the other guy's name. We're still on Twitch. Uh,
Yes.
but it kills me that it happened twice.
Oh, absolutely.
So, you've heard of the history of the entire world, I guess, video, right?
Bill Words, yes.
Have you seen it?
Yes, of
Do
course.
you enjoy it?
It, it's a very general it's a very generalization of the history of the whole world.
Keeping that in the edit, you know?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Uh, it is the very general base of the history of the world. But yes, I think it's in terms of like glossing over different events within history, I think it does a decent job.
So, let's say you were to make one of your own. In that same time frame, which I looked it up, it's a little bit under 20 minutes, like 19 minutes and like 30 seconds,
Oh
thereabouts.
God.
It's not long. What
No, it's really not.
But what parts of history would you have covered in that time frame?
Obviously, the formation of the Earth.
Mhm.
That's a big one. Formation of the Earth and the solar system. Everything like that obviously needs to be addressed if it's a history of the world. We also have to address the different eras through evolution. So we're talking Cambrian explosion, we're talking Mesozoic, uh, we're talking dinosaurs, we're talking multiple supercontinents, multiple ice storms. We're talking about formation of land, algae, fauna, flora, evolution of humans.
Mm-hmm.
We would obviously have to discuss the technological and intellectual advancements of human civilization.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we'd also have to talk about the big geopolitical civilizations. So we're talking Rome, Byzantium, Aztecs. We're talking, what else? Talking the Indian civilizations, Chinese civilizations, Japan. We're talking about the various different uh, Middle Eastern empires, because there are a lot of those.
Mm-hmm.
Ancient Egypt, Hittite Empire. We're talking about the caliphates. We're talking about the Rus peoples, Mongolians, Central European peoples, because there have been some empires through there too. Um, we're talking about Habsburg, Spain, Portugal, UK, France, Sweden, like so many big players. United States, Russia, China. Like you have to address basically every single country almost.
So I'm pretty sure that's more than 20 minutes.
I can guarantee you if you wanted to accurately and like at least a little bit in depth describe the history of the whole world, you are going to need at least 2 hours, if not longer.
So you mean to tell me that we could get a stream of you giving us the history of the entire world?
No, because I don't know every aspect of the history of the whole world.
Damn.
No.
Damn
As
it.
much as that would be fun to do, I'm no I didn't go to school for history. I only know what I know, right? And I'm still learning things. I'm still learning a lot about uh pre-colonial Africa, and I'm still hi, welcome in. I'm still learning about the Middle East and India, and like unfortunately a lot of my history is very Eurocentric,
Mm-hmm.
very Euro and American centric, right?
Mm.
Which unfortunately isn't a good thing, because there is a lot of history outside of Europe and the Americas,
Right.
especially if we're talking about like scientific history and also
True.
mathematical history. A lot of that is from India and the Middle East. A lot more than we give credit for. A
This is
lot of
very
people
true.
think it's European.
No.
It's not. That
Good
is a
chunk of it
lie
is
that
the
people
Middle
tell
East.
you.
A good chunk of it is the Middle East, yeah.
Yeah. I should
So
end this stream reacting to the rap battle between Caesar and Zulu. Oh my god.
tempting. But I do have to put this on Spotify. I keep on saying this. So let's say, what would be the number one thing that you would want to right now learn about history?
Right now, what something I really do want to learn
Yes.
is I really want to learn about the colonization of Australia and New Zealand. That
Mm-hmm.
is something that I don't know much about, but I really should know more about and I should learn about,
Mm-hmm.
because it is very important, obviously, right?
Yeah, of course. And let's say there's like one thing that you feel like is not covered enough in history. What do you think it is?
If I had to take a guess, right, it would probably be the Renaissance. The Renaissance it is a very,
Really?
very historically and culturally significant time period within the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it's not covered enough.
Interesting. I would think probably this is just going off of like my knowledge of history, and I would think it'd probably be something having to do with particularly like African cultures, because I feel like that does not get
Absolutely.
enough history
Absolutely.
coverage.
You could make that argument for any, whether that be African
Mm,
civilization or Southeast Asian
God, that's
civilization
true.
or even indigenous. Like,
God, that's true. We do not cover enough. Like outside of the very polished history, it's like kind of dawning on me how little we actually cover of history. And it's kind of sad.
Kai, Kai, that is
I'm
that is
not,
very,
I'm
very
not,
far from Renaissance history. That is very far from it. Yes,
I'm not
yes,
involved
religion
in
was
that
a big
comment.
thing in it. Don't get me wrong, it absolutely was. But there is so much, like, culturally and musically and artistically. Like, those are the big things: cultural, musical, and artistic.
Mhm.
Right? Those are the three big things that you're looking for in the Renaissance. So you're looking at Mozart, you're looking at Beethoven, you're looking at all these historically significant musicians and artists. You're looking at uh artist. Trying to think of an artist. I'm bad with art.
Same.
Who's the one that did Starry Night?
Van Gogh?
He was in, yeah, Van Gogh. He was in the Renaissance.
Starya, you forgot Van Gogh's name?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. We don't talk about it.
You know what? Fair enough.
Unfortunately, that is the truth, Bippo. Unfortunately.
So,
Look, history is a very broad thing. There's so much to history. Sometimes you skip out on names or years.
or or massive or massive civilizations.
Yeah,
So,
it happens sometimes.
what do you know about what was it called? About the Victorian era?
So obviously, this was when Queen Victoria was in charge. Um, the Victorian era had a lot of crusades. Crusades were sort of a big thing.
Mhm.
You had the Templars. The Templars were a huge thing within both England and France at the time. There was
Mhm.
a lot of back and forth with England and France in terms of wars. So we're talking 7 Years' War, War of Spanish Succession. We're talking uh, the unifications of Prussia into Germany and Sicily into Italy, right? Those are obviously very big events that happened during the Renaissance,
Right.
or not Renaissance, Victorian era. My bad. Um, this is also sort of around the time when the UK was at its sort of peak in terms of discovering and colonizing land. The Victorian era is a very expansionist era.
Mhm.
There's a lot of expansion within. We're talking Africa, we're talking the Middle East, we're talking North America, we're talking Central America,
Mm.
everywhere.
Yes. So, do you see any through lines between the major empires of history?
What do you mean by that?
So, like, we've had several empires: Roman, Greek, Egyptian. I feel like we can argue for. Uh, so each of these empires has been vastly different culturally, but I believe, at least, that in the way that they operate, they may have some through lines and they may have some similarities.
Oh, absolutely.
So, what similarities do you see between these major empires, if any?
One of the biggest similarities between empires, right, is ideology. Ideology is a huge part, right? And it can take form in multiple different variations, whether that be caliphates, empires, or kingdoms, right? A lot of empires have monarchy at its base roots. There's a lot of monarchy or empowerment sort of intertwined with it, with royal families or empirical families, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you think of one of the biggest ones, let's say the Habsburgs, right?
Ah, the Habsburgs.
The Habsburgs, there have been Austrian Habsburgs, obviously that's the most known one. Spanish Habsburgs,
Mm-hmm.
Italian Habsburgs. The Habsburgs have involved themselves within the Netherlands. They were also owned by the Habsburgs.
Were they?
Yes,
That's
yes, they
crazy.
were.
I did not know
Uh,
that.
yes, they gained their independence, but they were under the Habsburg realm for a while.
Mm.
The Habsburgs are one of the most notorious monarchical families. They've been everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Monarchism is a very big thing within empires, all centralized around one person, right?
Mm. Yes.
There have been some empires as well have sort of taken a different stance,
Yes.
right? So you look at the Roman Empire, right? In the early days of the Roman Empire, in the early days of it,
Mm-hmm.
it was a democratic empire. There was a lot of democratic elements within the Roman Empire.
Yes.
The Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth, right? That is actually argued to be the very first officially democratic state, even before the United States. The United States was the first one that came up with a definition for it.
Yeah.
But in reality, the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth is the very first state that had democratic institutions.
Mm.
They
Was it
had,
the US that first came up with the name for democracy? I feel like that would have been before
yes,
America. Hmm.
no, America was
Interesting.
the first ones who technically, quote unquote, created democracy, so to speak.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, a lot of empires are mostly monarchical.
Mm. If there's anywhere in history that you would like to visit and experience for yourself, when and where would it be and why?
Like if we're talking traveling throughout time, or
Time
are
travel.
we talking time travel?
Time travel.
The end of the Renaissance,
Hmm.
the beginning of the Industrial Age. This would have been when Martin Luther King, not
Martin
Jr.,
Luther.
not Jr., we're talking Martin Luther King. That is when the printing press was created. That is when Christianity split from two types of Christianity into three.
Mm-hmm.
So that would have been, oh, thank you, just Martin Luther. Thank you. Uh, yes, that would have been the creation of Protestantism. That would have been the creation of basically of the industrial age. We're talking steam engines, we're talking coal, steel, we're talking manufacturing on a whole new level. We're talking, instead of everything being artisan made and handcrafted, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mass manufacturing of goods.
Mm.
This is when trains would have been invented. This is when cars would have been widespread,
True.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I would have loved to visit that time period just so I could learn the true extent of we're going from here, which is a medieval civilization, everything's artisan, handcrafted, all of a sudden into you can just buy it, whatever you need from a store, you just buy it.
I have to wonder though, like, did some people of that time kind of like have the same reaction that people do now of just like, well, back in my day when you had to make everything by hand, it was better and it's superior because nonsense.
Well, there's always going to be an argument for that, right? It's with any new thing, right? Humans as a whole are scared of change. We don't like change, right? So
Right.
when we see something change, when we see the norm, for example, I'll take this for example because this
Mm-hmm.
is more recent history. The shift from flip phones to handheld phones,
Mm.
right? There were some staunch people who were like, I am not getting rid of my flip phone. I do not like these new handheld phones. How dare they be handheld, right?
I do not like these newfangled phones that can go in my hand.
There will always be people who have and will be afraid of things like that,
That's
right?
true.
But the thing is, with history, things always change, things will always evolve, things will always happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether that be for better or for worse, right?
Yeah, that's
There
fair.
will always be change throughout history. Nothing will ever stay the same forever,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can never stay at the status quo.
Mm-hmm. So
So eventually you just have to adapt.
this is true. Some of us are better adapting than others.
Absolutely.
I'm not good at it sometimes, but I'm working on it. Hey, I'm autistic. I have a reason to be bad at it.
That's fair.
Now, I know that, like, without the history that we currently have, then people wouldn't be the same. However, are there any parts of history that you would change if you got the chance? Ignoring any terrible butterfly effect repercussions. I know they're hard to ignore, but ignoring any horrifying butterfly effect repercussions, are there any points in history that you would change if you got the chance to?
Oh, absolutely. We could absolutely change history for the better. And if there was zero repercussions to what could happen in the future, right?
Yes.
Then, you know, why not, right?
Mm-hmm. I only say
Something
that.
There is one thing in particular, right? That's more recent that
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if we went back in time to change would have drastic effects on today for the better.
What would it be?
Preventing 9/11. You prevent 9/11, you prevent the war on terror, you prevent anti-Middle Eastern sentiment, you calm and quell a lot, not all, but a lot of Middle Eastern terrorism, right? There wouldn't be as much anti-Muslim sentiment within the world.
Mm-hmm. I can say as a New Yorker, right? And I say this as someone who lives in New York. One of the biggest impacts that 9/11 had for us, especially as someone who's not Muslim and lives in New York, was that all of a sudden it became more expensive to do everything. Like taking a plane, there weren't fees on bags before 9/11. What the fuck, guys? We didn't need that. That wasn't
Yeah.
necessary.
I can tell you one thing, Skywalker, you absolutely have a point with that as well.
I would prevent the
Either
fall
preventing or
of.
cushioning the fall of the USSR would make the world a better place.
That's fair. And are there any final points on history or alternate history. I know we didn't get to touch on alternate history very much. Apologies. My brain looked at alternate history and went, wee.
You're good. You're good.
Are there any final points that you would like to touch on?
I mean, I think alternative history is a very interesting thing to look into.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, obviously it's very subjective, and there could be vastly different worlds. One interesting one, right, that I can touch on is there's a Hearts of Iron 4 mod, right? There's a game called it's
It called
World
what?
War II called Hearts of Iron 4.
Oh, okay.
It's a World War II simulation game,
Mm-hmm.
though there have been mods made for different time periods. And there's a mod called Red World, right?
Mm.
So this is taking a fairly recent event, the Cold War, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is changing it, right? So that instead of the West winning, right, and democracy winning, this is changing that and flipping it on its head, right?
Mm-hmm.
So instead of the USSR collapsing, the United States collapses. The USSR survives, albeit it's very shaky, right?
Right.
The USSR survives and the world starts to embrace communism and socialism as opposed to democracy.
I feel like that'd be a better world. Just like socialism in particular, but I also don't know because like I live in this world. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's the thing with alternate history. You never truly know because, again, it's alternate. You don't know what'll happen.
Fair.
Right?
Fair enough.
I could tell you one thing.
Yeah.
In that kind of a world, it would be a world more for the people.
It's true. It's very true. All right, Starya, do you have anything to tell the people about before we wrap up?
Yes. In case you were interested in talking about alternate me with
You're breaking up.
Lunar here. Oh, am I breaking up?
Yes.
Whether you're interested in history, alternate history, or not really all that interested, but you want to get into it, I am always more than happy to talk about history or alternate history in any subject. Can be dark, can be wholesome, anything. Ever want to talk to me about it, you can come to me and ask any questions about it. If I don't know the answer, I'll most likely look into it and come back to you with an answer. And if you ever are curious and want to have a chat with Lunari about it, then I'm sure they're open to it as
Whoa,
well.
whoa. Why are we throwing me into the situation? Oh, no shit.
But hey, there's always room to learn.
That is very true. Thank you so much for joining me today, Starya. It has been a great time talking to you and getting to learn about what makes your heart sparkle.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, of course. And, and until next time, I'm Lunati, and I'm signing off for the night. Bye.
Good night.